Almost directly following the American Revolution was the French Revolution. So let me describe what was happening in France in the 1700s. Nobles, the royal class, and Roman Catholic priests, the clergy, they never paid taxes. So the mass of French people were farmers that had to pay heavy taxes to both the royal class and the church. The Roman Catholic Church was basically in control of the French government, and if you weren't with the Roman Catholic Church, you were going to be persecuted by the Roman Catholic Church. In the year 1788, France was deeply in debt. Historians say that they were in debt due to funding the American Revolution. However, they were in debt long before that, because that's how the church controls their royal governing class, through monetary loans. Just like the church controls the governments of today, through their banking, through loans, through debt. The governments of the old world were the royal families, and they were controlled by the Vatican in the same fashion, through the Vatican bankers. So when the French royals helped support the American Revolution, it was more of a way of fighting old enemy England. They weren't really interested in helping the cause of freedom in America. Especially when you research King of France, Louis XVI, you'll realize what a piece of shit he is. So to understand the war between France and England, it's better to think of them as two Roman Catholic made guys, or mafia families fighting over control. So France always had problems with England, especially the English Navy taking over French colonies in North America and in other places throughout the world, as England set up a monopoly over trade routes. England wanted to control all trade throughout the world, and they had the best navy to do it. So in 1788, King of France, Louis XVI, was spending half his national budget to service the federal debt he owed to the Vatican bankers. He tried to fix the debt through many different finance ministers. So he fired his French Alan Greenspan and hired his French Ben Bernanke, and they all came up with different but the same plans, and at the end of the day, the Vatican bankers always win and you lose. And whenever you do a deal with the Vatican Corporation, you're going to die. So France began to go bankrupt. And to make matters worse for the French common people, who were mostly farmers, was a series of hailstorms which ruined their harvest. So they began to starve alongside of getting ripped off by the Roman Catholic priest and the royal government, who still wanted their high taxes and gave the peasants very little rights. So everybody was pretty upset in 1788, and in response to all these problems, King Louis XVI called together the Estates General, which was the closest thing they had to a parliament. And this parliament had not met for 174 years. So they called this parliament the Estates General, and it was a meeting between the three estates, or the three pillars of French society. The first estate was the Roman Catholic priests. The second estate was the royal class. And the third estate was everybody else, the middle to lower classes. Merchants, the shopkeepers, and the farmers. And of course, the middle to lower classes supported the Roman Catholic priests and royal classes, which lived in palaces and abbeys and monasteries and did very little work and accomplished little, except for keeping everyone else down so they could maintain control. So for most of the French people, when they revolted and wanted to change things, it was about lack of food and these heavy taxes and burdens they put on the poor, which made living intolerable and only benefited the priest and royal classes. So the early revolutionaries of France called for a constitutional monarchy, which meant that they wanted to have like a Congress that had some voice alongside the king. So when they went to this Estates General meeting that King Louis called, it didn't solve anything. And the French royals and the Roman Catholic priests, who have systematically kept the French people down, weren't about to change. So the French commoners decided to form their own assembly, which they called the National Assembly. So the King of France says, you know what? I'll just put an end to that little National Assembly. When everyone went out for recess to get something to eat, he locked the doors of the Parliament building and said, you can't get back in. So that's how much King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette appreciate freedom. So the French commoners said, you know what? We'll just find another building. And that turned out to be an indoor tennis court. And that resulted in the tennis court oath, where they swore they would not give up until a French constitution was established. So Louis XVI sent his troops to Paris to quote-unquote quell uprisings, but the revolutionaries saw this as a threat, so they seized the giant Bastille prison. They freed the prisoners and they got guns. Now this giant prison was where all the enemies of the church and royal state wound up. If the royal family or the Roman Catholic Church didn't like you, they would lock you up in this giant fortress-styled prison. So part of the revolutionary force, the rebel force, was to storm that prison and free the prisoners. So on August 4th, 1789, the National Assembly, this new Congress or Parliament made of common French people, they abolished the royal class, which was called the Ancien Regime. And they also removed the Catholic Church from power. So this National Assembly abolished feudal rights, the tithes or taxes to the church, privileges for nobles and the Roman Catholic Church, unequal taxation, and a new constitution was written called the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. And this said that everyone had the right to liberty, property, and security. So at first, like I said, the revolutionaries wanted a constitutional monarchy, which meant the parliament shared power with the king. But after some more issues regarding rumors of this royal family hoarding grain while everyone else was starving, prompted armed women to kick the royal family out of their palace. Around 1789, the King of Austria issued a declaration which promised to restore the French King Louis XVI to his throne. And King Louis XVI pretended he hated this idea, and he encouraged the new French government, the National Assembly, to invade Austria, to shut that other king up. So when France invaded, both Austria and Prussia attacked France, and France began to lose as King Louis XVI said, yeah, kick these fucking French rebels' ass, and he encouraged the Austrian and Prussian forces to fight the French rebel forces even harder. So at that point, the National Assembly finally woke up to whose side the King of France was really on, which was the side of his fellow royals. He was related to the King of Austria. It was his brother-in-law or father-in-law or something. And they chopped Louis XVI's head off and finally voted for a republic instead of a constitutional monarchy. So once the people of France joined together and they attacked first the Catholic Church itself, second, they attacked their royal inbred families, the Roman Catholic Church saw their power crumbling in France and realized they had to do something, so they utilized their final force, being Their secret societies are Freemasons. And the Freemasonic goal was to hijack the French Revolution. The Jacobins were this secret society, this Freemasonic group. And they were a lot like the Sons of Liberty, you'll find out. So I want to discuss this group because they exist to confuse a lot of things. The Jacobins are Freemasons. They're controlled by the Roman Catholic Church, and they are basically controlled opposition. The Jacobins have ties to the Dominican order of the Catholic Church. The Jacobins pretend to be radical and revolutionary, but are infiltrators who manipulate whatever revolutionary movement there is from within after assuming some sort of radical leadership role. So they pretend they're the coolest, hottest, most radical rebels. They get in there into the different groups and then they take over from within. That's Freemasonry. Those are your secret societies. Then they write history and try to tell you how all the movers and shakers of history were all Freemasons instead of what they actually are. Parasites and stalkers and nobodies that have to join crowds of people to feel like something because they're nobody on their own. And they hate individuality, and they hate independence, and they hate freedom, and they hate you. So wake up and stop joining these secret societies. So soon after the Jacobins get in there, the French Revolution gets hijacked, and you can see when the Jacobins begin to take control because everyone else starts going a little crazy. That's the nature of the craft, the Freemasonic craft. Once they get in there and start mingling with the natural grassroots revolutionaries and the rebels who stood up against these corrupt powers because they had to and something had to get done, watch the little freaking Freemasons come sniff you out and watch how quickly your movement gets basically driven insane by the craft and misguided and ultimately sent right back to Rome, right back to the Vatican. So two Jacobins who hijacked the French Revolution are Robespierre. So Robespierre suspends the new French Constitution, then starts using the guillotine to execute thousands of people, which probably included the real leaders of the French Revolution. Another Jacobin is Napoleon Bonaparte. Everything the rebels fought for was undone by Napoleon. Napoleon brings the royal families back to power and reinstates the Catholic Church's power in France.